Spider-Man 3 is painfully average. I find it kinda odd that out of all the Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man 3 is the one I've watched the most. It's not as good as the first Spider-Man movie. It's not even close to the level of Spider-Man 2. But I'll be damned if it isn't the most enjoyable one out of the trilogy. There's just something about it that makes me want to watch it over and over again. Now, is this movie bad? Well, I don't even know if I'd call it that. Is it passable? Yeah. It's more like half a level higher than passable. It's okay. This was riding off of the coattails of Spider-Man 2, one of the best superhero movies out there. So the fact that it was a huge disappointment didn't help much at all. But it isn't just a soulless cash grab. It's not just a soulless product. There's actually small glimmers of some passion scattered throughout here. I want to start off with this. I get the hate towards the dancing scenes. I personally found it funny, but humor's subjective, I get that. But saying that this whole movie failed because of this one scene? Yeah, not so sure about that one. There is much worse than these dancing scenes in Spider-Man 3, which we'll get into later. To be quite honest with you, it really isn't that much goofier than the raindrops keep falling on my head montage from Spider-Man 2. I mean, look at this. You'd think I edited the video so that it paused at the right frame. But no, this is actually in the movie. What about in the first one where these guys literally just vaporized from a pumpkin flash? MJ and Harry aren't that much farther away from them, and they're completely fine. It didn't even do anything to the buildings around them. This is something you'd see from Scooby-Doo. But no one really cared about it because it fit the campy tone of the movie. The movie as a whole was great. I'm not saying that it needs to be there. You could easily take it out and it wouldn't be much of a problem. I just think that's Sam Raimi being Sam Raimi with his sense of humor. They always kept that sense of the characters that made them so special in the first two films. At the beginning of Spider-Man 3, Peter still feels like Peter, MJ still feels like MJ, and Harry still feels like Harry. People love to bag on Kirsten Dunst because she seems emotionless half the time. I don't know, I actually kinda liked her here. All the unlikable stuff people seem to criticize her for her performance is really in the script itself. You can swap out Kirsten for Emma Stone, and I guarantee you, the unlikable qualities are still gonna be pretty unlikable. I think she does the best with what she's given. And their relationship, I think, is much more compelling in this one than the ones prior to this. Peter comes off so annoyingly innocent that it's funny, and I mean that in a good way. He's always going on about the whole horse thing.
Spider-Man gets attacked all the time.
This isn't about you. This is about me. It's about my career.
I know, and I'm just saying you can't let it bring you down. You just gotta believe in yourself and you pull yourself together, you get right back on the horse and...
Don't give me the horse thing. Try and understand how I feel.
You just gotta bring yourself and pull yourself together.
I'll admit though, the Gwen Stacy subplot could totally be tossed out of here. We don't really need another love triangle. We got a lot of that in the other ones before this. He even kisses Gwen in front of her. Like, what? Who does that? Who do you think you are? Shazam! The reality check Spider-Man goes through with MJ and Harry, it's all powerful stuff. I think it's safe to say that this one easily had the potential to be the best in the franchise. The best parts of this movie are the things that were built up from the last two movies. The confrontations between Harry and Peter, the confrontations with MJ and Harry. They're all the saving graces in this one. And as much as people say this plotline could easily be taken out, I think the Sandman story arc is alright. His motivations, for the most part, make sense. Aside from the stupid part where he joins Venom, it makes sense. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the Uncle Ben retcon. It's actually really dumb, but I think for what they were going for, it isn't too bad. You can tell Raimi actually cared for this character. He turned his life into a tragedy. In a way, you could say that Sandman in this movie is a mirror image of Spider-Man. Throughout the runtime, Peter's been trying to get back at him for accidentally killing Uncle Ben. He is ruthless and is on the brink of going insane over it. He won't stop chasing him until he's dead. Does that remind you of anyone?
Have you done? Avenge me!
swear on my father's grave, Spider-Man will pay.
It symbolizes him becoming Harry. A dude bloodlusted over the death of his father figure. Is it as well executed as it should have been? No, but I think it is handled somewhat competently. It's an okay written parallel to Spider-Man. It's emotionally resonant and consistent with the theme of the movie. These characters aren't that bad here. But most people overlook this because they tend to throw them into the same pile as the third villain. His presence alone almost managed to undermine the message of the film. It's time to talk about everybody's favorite character in the movie.
So, where to?
This is another one of my unpopular opinions. I didn't think Topher Grace did that bad of a job. Wait, hear me out, let me talk! If you thought that I had nothing good to say about Venom, you'd be partially right. It's pretty obvious that the main through line here is the theme of forgiveness. Everyone hates each other in this movie. Harry hates Peter, Peter hates Flint, MJ hates everybody. They all forgive each other at the very end of it. And I think Raimi was trying to throw Eddie Brock in there somehow, even though it didn't work all the way. But in some ways, it did. In the same sense they made Sandman a reflection of Spider-Man, they made Eddie Brock a reflection of Peter Parker. He was kinda wimpy and dorky. He was sorta scrawny, he was trying to get the girl who was way out of his league, he never caught a break. Everyone picks on him throughout the movie, and I thought that worked fine in this universe. Sure, he wasn't as hulking or huge like he's usually drawn, but then again, I don't think Raimi was going for that anyways. It made sense in the world it's set in, and I found that side of things compelling. Cause now, it isn't just about Peter becoming someone who's out for revenge like Harry. It isn't just some random dude having one bad day. It's the story of someone who's turned into everything he's hated since day one. It's the story of a nerd becoming a bully. It's the regression of Spider-Man. The parts where he's going around through his emo phase is a very exaggerated version of a jock with superpowers. They got all the stereotypes here. Acting like you're cool when you're actually not? Check. Trying so hard to draw attention to yourself to the point where it's cringy? Check. Beating up people because you feel like it? Check. What if you were Spider-Man without any of the responsibility? What if you didn't care about the consequences others paid for your actions? That Peter we saw way back in the first movie. The one this Peter learned and grew from. The one that felt genuinely happy that he finally beat up the bully in front of the whole school. The one that hadn't been told yet that with great power comes great responsibility. That's the same Peter smiling in front of you right now. That bitterness and hate inside Peter we got a taste of in the first movie is now here in its full form. He bullies Eddie almost half the time they share screen time. And I found it interesting how Raimi was able to deconstruct Spider-Man all the way back to the beginning. Back where it all started. But when Eddie turns into Venom, things start not making a lot of sense. Things start getting a little muddy. I liked the idea of him being the corrupted version of Peter Parker. I loved the idea of Venom being the complete mirror image of Spider-Man. But the thing is, in this movie, you already got a dude for that! Venom does have a purpose in this movie. Despite what everyone's been trying to tell you, Venom does have a purpose in this movie, but it just doesn't fit within the time he's given. Sandman's arc almost has the same message that the Venom arc was trying to get across. The only difference was that Sandman's was much more well written, and it actually fit into the narrative and context of this movie. Venom's supposed to be the dark version of Spider-Man, and Sandman is supposed to be the symbol of Spider-Man's inner conflicts. You can pick one or the other, but just not like this. This has been said over and over again, and I 100% agree with it. Venom should have been saved for Spider-Man 4, or even Spider-Man 5. Spider-Man 3 was gonna feel overstuffed regardless if Venom was in the movie or not. You still had MJ to deal with, Harry, Eddie Brock, and Sandman. Why not make Eddie's turn to the dark more gradual? expand on his relationship with Peter a bit. Maybe they understand each other's bad luck, and maybe they feel sorry for one another. Venom being here almost contradicts Sandman's development. Flint teams up with him to kill Spider-Man because at the end, he says he wants him dead? But throughout the rest of the movie, they made it very clear that's not his goal at all. He doesn't want to do that. He just wants to save his daughter. At this point, Spider-Man thinks he's dead. He thinks he's killed him. Why not just lay low and tend to your daughter? Find money for her some other way. You got a second chance to make things right. He even says at the end that,
I didn't choose to be this.
Did y'all just forget this, or is this another thing Sony didn't really care for? And because of that, because most of the Venom stuff doesn't work, fragments of the Sandman and Harry stuff don't work either. There's a point where they just start collapsing into each other. Up until the third act, everything's pretty fine. Nothing too bad happens. But it's that third act that really makes the flaws in this movie much more apparent. Like if you write down the final showdown on paper and read it aloud, it doesn't sound like it even belongs in the Spider-Man universe this movie is set in. A big giant blob of sand teams up with a black goop from outer space so that they can take out Spider-Man once and for all. He's almost beaten to death in front of a crowd of thousands of people, but alas, James Franco is here to save him. Together, they take them out, only for one of them to sacrifice themselves, and the scene ends with a zoom in into the sunset.
This is what I'm talking about.
The other endings, while still kinda cheesy, the tensions were high and believable. Spider-Man fought the bad guys on a one-on-one, more personal level. It was much more secluded and isolated. In the first one, it takes place in an abandoned building. The punches are heavy, the music is turned down a bit, and the dialogue is really good. They made the audience feel like they were there with him. In the second one, the music was louder, but they kept that consistent tone so that the audience got invested into the scene. Even the train scene had some sense of realism and weight to it. In this one, it's more like you're watching things go boom with the people watching down below, disconnected, and you're just there admiring the spectacle. It almost sounds fanfiction. I think the way they handled the team up with Peter and Harry was a cool idea, but to have his butler be the one who causes it, having him finally tell him the truth about Norman after years, it comes out of left field and it's just too convenient. It only makes the pacing suffer. There's too much going on with not enough screen time to go around. It gets to a point where the characters start saying things that are supposed to be implied.
Not a bad person, just had bad luck.
Oh really? We didn't notice. The biggest problems this movie suffers from is the amount of subplots it's trying to juggle, which a lot of people before me have already pointed out. But hey, 2.5 out of the 3 worked pretty okay. And I haven't even mentioned the cinematography or the choreography yet. The birth of Sandman is still visually beautiful as it was 10 years ago. All the fight scenes are shot really well. This is still one of my favorite Spider-Man sequences in any Spider-Man film. The way they show Peter's fall from grace is actually more compelling than people give them credit for. Do I think Spider-Man 3 is a bit of a mess? Yeah, but it's far from being the worst superhero movie out there, let alone the worst movie. The pacing and script could have been done a lot better. The movie could have done without Venom, but I still give it a C+.
Double time!